Hi there, welcome to Thinkstone. I wanted to give you a short introduction to Track8. We just start with the IOs. At the back, you have a power LED here. Green means Track8 is running. If you power it down, it glows purple for a short amount of time, so please don't pull the power plug while it's shutting down. Next, we have two USB-A ports. You can either use like a data USB stick to import a WAV or MIDI files, and you can also connect MIDI USB gear to connect directly to Track8. Then we have an USB-C port that's used to connect to your PC. With this, Track8 can expose its internal SSD to your PC to copy the whole project folders, for example, or to update the internal application. Then there's a hidden reset button. You use this only to update the base image. Then we have the MIDI in and out. Then we have a foot switch connector. You can use this to connect a single switch foot switch. With this, you can either start and pause playback, you can toggle the recording, or you can punch and record. Then we come to our input section. We have three different kinds of inputs there. One stereo input, one mono input, and one mic input. All of these are balanced, but keep in mind you can only use one input at a time, and you select the currently selected input via this selector switch. Then we also have a phantom power switch, so you can use condenser mics, and then we have the monitor output. Let's head over to the user interface. So we have 8 track encoders, and we have 8 track buttons. We have one input volume control, that's analog. We have the previously mentioned input selector switch, and we have an output volume control. Then on the right side, we have a 4x4 grid of buttons, and let's go into them. So at the bottom, we have a shift button that's basically used for additional functionality of all other buttons. Then we have a playback button to play and pause recording. And then we have 2 navigation buttons. So by default, they move the playhead by 1 measure at a time. You can also keep them pressed to move around quickly. But you can also use shift and move by 1 beat at a time, for example. With shift play, you can jump back to the latest cut point, which I'm going to explain later. Or if there's no previous cut point, we're jumping back to the beginning of the tape. In the next row, we have a button to enable or disable looping. Then we have a button to set the loop in point and a button to set the loop out point. Last in a row is the arm recording button. So this arms the recording for the selected track. With shift loop, we can toggle punch in. So you can punch in at a pre-selected region. And with shift in and out, we can use it to set the punch in and out points. Next, we have the row with the cut point button. So cut points are basically these small yellow triangles. You define regions in your tape with these cut points, and all following buttons only apply in one of these regions. So for example, the next one is the cut button. So without shift, you just cut everything on the selected track and move it to the clipboard. Here in the clipboard, you see we have 8 track indicators, so you know from which track you moved something to the clipboard. We also have an undo functionality. So with shift record, you can undo what you previously did to the tape. Keep in mind, the undo stack is 8 minutes long, so you can either undo 8 minutes of a single track you changed, or you can undo 8 tracks of 1 minute each. And the same applies for all the cutting operations. So you can cut or copy at most 8 minutes of audio, and it doesn't really matter if you cut or copy 8 minutes of one track or 8 times 1 minute for 8 different tracks. Yeah, as mentioned, next we have this copy. That's the same as cut, but it just doesn't cut, just move to the clipboard. And then we could go to another track and then paste. Pasting is always done at the playhead, and it just pastes whatever is in the clipboard. With shift and the cut point button, you remove all the cut points, which comes in quite handy if everything is too convoluted, but let's just add them back in. Then with shift cut, you cut everything in the tape that's not muted. So for example, let's mute track 8 and now we shift cut. Now you can see that all the tracks are cut except for the muted tracks. And we still have them in the clipboard. So we see that only from the highlighted tracks, we have moved something to the clipboard. If we have multiple tracks in the clipboard, paste no longer applies for pasting to the selected track, but it's pasting to the respective tracks where they come from. So if we paste here, you can see we pasted basically everything from the clipboard into the respective tracks. One extra functionality for the shift paste is that if we, for example, paste now here, everything in the clipboard is bounced into one track, and it's respecting the volume and the pannings of each of these tracks. We get more into detail for the panning and the volume once we reach the screens. So let's go to the last row. In this row, we have our screens. So we have an audio screen, we have a MIDI screen, we have effects, and we have a file browser. Let's stay in the audio screen for now. Here, the encoders control the volume of each of the tracks, and shift controls the panning of these tracks. Then for the buttons, you basically select with these buttons the currently selected track, and with shift you can mute and unmute these tracks. On the left side, we see the pre-effect volumes of each of the tracks, and on the right side, if it's playing, we see the outgoing volumes of each tracks. Here we have an indicator for the input volume, for the one stereo input, and here we have an indicator for the output volume. Then you have an indicator for the current playhead position, so either in time, minutes and seconds, or a second indicator for the beats and measures you're in, and then how much space you used on the SSD. So as I mentioned, most of the buttons have a secondary functionality. How the logic works here is that with shift and one of the screen buttons, you get into a detail view. Let's do this here and go into the audio detail view. The audio detail view consists of 4 different subscreens. We have volume, pan, edit, and nudge. For the volume, you can just use your finger and draw in volume automations. You can do the same with panning. With shift pan or shift volume, you can clear the automation. On the top, you can select a track with the encoder. You can select what editing grid you want to have. You can change the zoom level. You can zoom in up to 2048 times, and then you can scroll by the grid. If you press the encoder 2, you can change from a beat approach to a millisecond approach. So if you really want to do fine editing, I would suggest this. And scroll basically scrolls in increments of jump. So we can do really fine-grained manipulation there. The most interesting thing probably happens in the edit stuff. So if we zoom out a bit, we have an edit region. The region by standard starts with the measures, or if you have cut point sets, it adheres to the region between 2 cut points at first, but you can always change it. So for example, we can change the start here and the end here. If we want to do finer manipulation, we can also zoom further in and just decrease the grid, for example. We can also go deep into the millisecond territory and move this down. Then we can basically all the operations we previously had that adhere to the cut points are now only in the region that you set for your editing. Last one is nudge. Nudge works pretty similar to how the editing works, but nudge lets you nudge a selected region. So with the nudge button, you can move the selected region left or right. You can pre-listen to whatever you did there. Maybe we should zoom out a bit so it gets clearer. And if you want to confirm the nudge, you can just press the nudge button. Now let's go to the MIDI view. So MIDI behaves pretty similar. So you can think about it as having also a tape of MIDI. And the MIDI tape and audio tape are linked together. So they are, even though they are treated as separate tapes, they move in the same timeline. You also have 8 MIDI tracks. With the encoder, you can select what MIDI channel MIDI track routes to. So for example, I changed this from MIDI channel 8 to MIDI channel 11. You have your own clipboard for copying and pasting MIDI, and on the left you basically see the input MIDI signals, and on the right you see the output MIDI signals. So for example, in this case, I just connected my Korg radius. All the input signals get sent to the currently selected track. So for example, my Korg radius is on channel 1 and it's routed back into the stereo input. Now we can hear something, but if we switch to track 2, that sends out notes to MIDI channel 2, nobody's reacting to it. But with this, you can connect multiple synthesizers, each of them reacting to their own MIDI channel, and you can basically play this with one keyboard. As mentioned, there are indicators for MIDI signals. So for the input signal, there are 16 bars, one for each channel. You can here see activity for one channel, and on the output, you see the output signal. So it's now going out also on channel 1. If we select track 2, you can see that the activity now only happens on channel 2. And nobody's listening to it. We also have a MIDI detail view. So with Shift and MIDI, you go to the detail view now here for track 1. We have a step recorder in there, so you can activate the step recorder, and now I can just add a couple of notes here and play them back. The same as with the audio detail view, we have 3 different subscreens. One is the note screen. You can use the screen to add notes manually, change them in velocity, length, and so on. Delete them, for example. The second screen is an edit screen, same like with the audio edit screen. You can either use this to transpose notes. So here you can see the ghost notes where they would move. You can confirm the changes by pressing the button. Next one is a quantize feature. You set the quantize the same way and then confirm it. We have a velocity feature that changes the velocity in %. So all the notes affected would change by the amount you set. You also confirm it with pressing the encoder. And then we also have nudge. So we can nudge all the notes in a specific direction. Third screen, we have MIDI CCs. On this encoder, you can choose this CC you want to have. In default mode without Shift, these are all the parameters that are named by the MIDI standard. You can also use Shift and the encoder, and then you can access all the free CCs, so that are unnamed. There are some parameters considered switches, for example, sustain pedal. These can only be on or off. And then you have other parameters like modulation, for example, that can be changed more freely. As with the volume automation and panning automation, you can clear your MIDI CCs with a Shift press. The last page is the pitch bend, which acts similar to the MIDI CCs, but it just sends different kind of values according to the MIDI standard. Let's go to the third screen. In the third screen, we have the master effects. So Track8 has 2 master effects. That's delay and a reverb. And then in the end, we also have a compressor. So in the master screen, we have a compressor view with the standard parameters. We can enable it, set a compression ratio, and then dial down the threshold and add some markup gain. What you see in green there is the incoming signal. So the signal before it hits the compressor. The red one is the outgoing signal, so after it hits the compressor. So if your red signal is higher than your green signal, that basically means just the added markup gain. And if the red signal is lower than the green signal, it basically shows you where the compression is happening. Nifty feature is also that if you just overdo it with the markup gain, you can clearly see where clipping is happening. So you can just dial down the gain to avoid this. Then with Shift and the effects button, you go to the track effects. Let's say we are on the drums here. We have a filter section. So we have a high pass filter, for example. We have a low pass filter, a band pass, and a notch filter. You can both control the frequency and the Q factor. Then each of these channels also has its own compressor that you can enable. And we have a delay and reverb send. So for example, now I'm sending 50% to the reverb, and on the master page we can then adjust the reverb according to taste. Last button here is the file browser. You can only access this if you have an USB drive attached, and then it will show you all the USB drives. Currently, I only have attached one stick, it's called data. You can use the scroll button to move around. You can press it to enter a folder. You can use the track button 8 also access a folder. Same with the play button. You can use track button 1 to exit a folder, or conveniently, you can also use the encoder 7 push to exit a folder. I have a couple of drum loops there. So let's go into this. If you have a audio file, you can just press the scroll button to start playback. You can also use the playback button or the 8 button, so they all work the same way. You can scroll down to find something you like, and then you copy it to the clipboard, move to your audio view, and paste it wherever you want. We can also play back MIDI files in there. We currently sending it out on channel 1. You can control the channel with the encoder 1. You can just play back it. Another great feature is you can go to your tape, you can choose whatever you like there. Let's go to track 2, that's some guitars. Let's do 2 cut points. Let's copy this to the clipboard, get back here, and now we can paste whatever we have in the audio clipboard with this button. It asks us for a name, say guitar, and now we saved it. And now it's here. We can do the same with MIDI. So let's go to the MIDI screen. We have something here on track 1. Let's copy this to the clipboard, go back to our USB stick, and then just paste the MIDI we have. Just name it MIDI. Go down here. We can see the MIDI file and then can play back it. Last screen we have is Shift Browser, and this takes you to your main settings. You can change the measure quite freely. You can change the metronome if it's on or off, or only for recording. You can change the volume for it. You can set your own count in, or if you want to have any count in at all. You can select if you want to have overdub, both for MIDI and audio. You can choose to record only audio or MIDI. So it only records audio if you're on the audio screen and only records MIDI if you're in the MIDI screen. But you can also choose to record audio and MIDI both at the same time. With this, you can select what your foot switch is doing. So with play, you can start playback and pause it with the same switch. So it acts similarly to the play button. You can arm or disarm recording, or you can hold record. So if you want to punch into a specific region while playing back the tape. You can choose to enable or disable monitoring. So if you want to hear the input signal on the output, or not if you connect it like an acoustic instrument and just hear it in a room and don't want to hear it a second time on your headphones. With Shift, you can also adjust the brightness of the screen. So if you're in a dimly lit room, like in your studio, so it doesn't blind you. This is the current project name and the version of the software it's running. There's a possibility to export to USB. Either you can choose to export the whole mix, and then you can define the region you want to. This takes some time because it bounces the whole tape with all the added effects and then copies it to the USB stick. You can also choose to export the stem files of this project. And then you basically get one folder with 8 audio files. Next one is the browse button. Here you can browse all your projects you currently have. On the right side, there's a preview rendered. Please keep in mind this takes some time because it has to read all your 8 audio tracks and then condense it in this overview. So it works much faster for smaller projects. In here, you can back up your projects to USB stick. You can import backups from the USB stick. You can save your current project under a new name. You can rename your current project. You can delete a project. You can't delete your current project, but you can delete any other project. But delete requires you to press the shift button and then you can delete. It asks you if you still want to delete it and then press the 6 button. Here you can create a new project with whatever name. It chooses the current name for you to edit, and you can load a project by simply hitting the load button. It takes some time to render the preview as all audio is streamed from disk. That's another interesting concept. So Track8 doesn't have any limitation on track length except for the 4-hour limit of WAV files. So what you see here is a preview that gets rendered on project load, but audio is available immediately. You can see here a streaming indicator that shows you how far off the playhead in the current buffer is. So you can see that it's moving forward and it's just loading new audio data in a streaming fashion. So if you move quickly around, you can see it gets read for a short amount of time because it has to jump to the current region in the audio file, but then it turns green again because it's loaded into its buffer. You might wonder how this works with looping. So if you set the loop in and loop out point, and these are outside of the audio buffer, looping happens without any interruption. That's because we remember the audio at loop start. So even though your loop might be very, very long, the example for this, audio gets playbacked immediately. Yeah, that's for the basic functionality of Track8. I quickly want to show you the PC integration. So you can either connect a PC, Mac, Linux, phone, whatever. If you just use the supplied USB-C to USB-A cable, just connect it to the PC port. Track8 automatically recognizes that computer is connected and reboots into device mode. This takes some time. Then it says disk mode, and then it exposes its internal SSD as an external storage device on your connected computer. You can use this to back up all your projects in there, and you can also use this to update internal firmware. Just make sure to properly eject the drive on your PC. You can just pull the cable and it's restarting again and booting into the normal mode. Yeah, that's it for now. Have a good time. Hopefully see you in the next video. Thank you.